are live.
Thank you, Larry Liberty Guy. Good to be back in the dugout with you. This is Mike Stenhouse, your host. As many of you know, I was away last week, long after 4 canceled vacations last year. We finally got one in, my wife and I. Tell you about that in a little while, where we went and why it's significant. And actually have a business trip next week. So we're going to do some best of and Larry Liberty Guy shows next week. Okay. I'm going to go in the dugout with I'm going to take it out of boycott land in my Red Sox hat. I actually watched a Red Sox game yesterday on Memorial Day, first time since the announcement of Major League Baseball canceling the game. So we're going to end the boycott. I'm still going to be highly critical of the situation, however. But, and I'll explain why this in a minute, but to this we've come. Going to mention that a few times today. To this we've come. We're going to have a special guest tomorrow. Make sure you tune in tomorrow, Wednesday. You're going to hear a world debut of an aria, or of a performance of an aria for freedom by an actual opera singer. It's not going to be live, but it's a video and audio experience. We're going to be talking with the performer, the opera singer, tomorrow. The theme is To This We've Come. Now, when I say marveled, you can marvel at something that's because of its greatness, its goodness, or the opposite, and how evil it might be. I am marveled in an alarming way at just how our world is upside down. How every traditionally held and proven successful tenet, from capitalism to freedom, has been turned upside down. Science doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. Just the woke narrative matter. And I have marveled, again, in an alarmingly negative way, at how this has taken hold in our country, in our state, and dominates not only political discourse, but actual public policy. It's frightening, and it has to end. So we're going to talk more about that. So just keep that in mind. To this we've come. I wonder what goes through your mind when you say, I can't imagine we've come to this point in this country. To this we've come. Just keep that in mind. So special debut of this performance tomorrow, world premiere. All right, today I'm going to give you, listen, I've been away out of this seat in the dugout for over a week. I've got a lot to say, so I'm going to say it. So I'm going to go for a good 30, 40 minutes today. And I'm still not going to cover 1/10 of what I want to talk about. End of the show, our guest at the last 20 minutes or so will be Travis Rowley. Wrote a really compelling piece on his blog, Good Men. And we will talk to Travis about his article entitled, let me get it right here. It's entitled, The Damaging Racism of the Race Obsessed. So and he was referring to Providence Public School. So we'll talk to Travis in about 30, 35 minutes or so. Tomorrow, I'm also going to cover today some Memorial Day thoughts. I had a birthday over the weekend. We'll talk a little musings and some fun stuff on that. A little Civil War history based on where I was on my trip, the Monitor versus the Merrimack. Many of you probably know what that is, but did you know that that's really an inaccurate misnomer? I'll explain that in a little while. Tomorrow, as I said, very excited for you to hear the aria for freedom, the world premiere of it that we want to play for you. Our special guest, I'll leave the name and everything a mystery till then, but Make sure you tune in tomorrow, and the theme of that is to this. We've come, and you're going to be astounded at the content of this aria that was written in the 1940s, but was recently reperformed and put to with some really, really interesting video and imagery, I should say, imagery in 2020. And we've got, and the performer is a Rhode Island resident, an opera singer. It's really cool. You're gonna like it tomorrow. Thursday, we're looking to confirm, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna have a parent from South Kingstown who heads up one of these parent groups, that has launched. This one is Rhode Island Parents Against Indoctrination of Our Students. Parentheses. She's put in a lot of records requests in South Kingston, try to figure out what the hell they're promoting when it comes to critical race theory and other educational related issues. And now the school board is threatening to sue her for putting in too many open records requests. Think about that. In her view, I talked to her this morning, they're just trying to bullying her to stop. They don't like people asking questions. So we're going to talk to Nicole, we hope, on Thursday about that. And of course, in our regular half hour, bottom of the hour on Thursdays, Dr. Andrew Boston on all things COVID. Lots in the news. Unclear, now that we appear to be reaching, we're certainly at the end of any emergency, or we should be. What's going to happen next? What does the research show? We'll talk to Dr. Boston about that. Okay, first of all, so we were in Williamsburg, Virginia last week, and it's a really historic town. So much Civil War and American Revolution history on that peninsula. That peninsula is just west of Richmond, Virginia, Jamestown, Yorktown, Williamsburg, all very close to each other. And it's about the fourth or fifth time we've been in that area. We've got some condo rights down there, and it's a really cool place. And I'm gonna in just a few minutes, I'm gonna talk about some of that. But my birthday was on Saturday. It's all public knowledge. There's no reason to hide it. It's in any Wikipedia and look up my baseball career or whatever. But here's something that, again, I'm just doing it as you might think it fun. Not everybody gets this kind of stuff on their birthdays, but here is a message from the Major League Baseball Players Alumni Association. And you can see the president of it. Many of you who follow baseball, Brooks Robinson, one of my heroes, a great Hall of Fame third baseman for the Baltimore Orioles in the 60s and 70s. Maybe the best defensive third baseman in the history of the game. He's the president. Joe Garagiola Jr., very active with alumni. A few other names. This guy right here, Steve Rogers. Steve Play. He's a member of their board. He's also worked for the Regular Players Association. He was a teammate of mine with the Montreal Expos, a dear friend. Dan Forster is the president of the MLBPAA. That's the alumni. Fred Valentine and Jim Hannon. These two names right here both play with my dad for the old Washington Senators. And you may recognize some of the other names here. And also, this is pretty cool. The Minnesota Twins have a really good alumni association. And this is the official Minnesota Twins birthday wish of their alumni. Well, current players as well. So I've got a happy birthday wish from the Minnesota Twins organization. And you can see the father-son card. There's my dad in his Senator's uniform, me and my Expos. And here's a few Twins baseball cards of me. And then I'll just show you this on the screen. I also got a happy birthday card from the Boston Red Sox Alumni Association. So again, it's just something kind of cool, to get that. Every year they come in the mail, they surprise, like, oh wow, that's cool. You don't expect those things. It was pretty cool. We had a nice family. We didn't follow Joe Biden's advice. We didn't wait for a July 4th cookout. We had a real nice in the rain cookout under a tent and in the backyard of my son's house. and we had a great day with mostly family and a couple of friends. Uh, Williamsburg. We were there last week. If you haven't been to Yorktown, we didn't do it this trip because we've done it twice before, but Yorktown is just amazing. You can drive it, you can walk it, probably too big to walk. You can take it, but you can get a CD like many of the battlefields or parks you go to, and as you drive around, it describes everything you're looking at and the background and the history of everything. And if you remember, there were two redoubts that the British held outside of Yorktown towards the end of the American Revolutionary War, and the French and under Lafayette stormed. I'm not sure it was redoubt number 10, and the American forces stormed number 9. And in number 9, there was a Rhode Island regiment that led the way. So very historical from a Rhode Island point of view. When they captured those two redoubts, they then were able to get their guns close enough to the main encampment where they could bombard it well and force the surrender of the trapped British forces under general's name, the guy that didn't show up for the surrender policy. Anyway, I'll remember it later. But anyway, Williamsburg, such a great place. Jamestown there, Civil War battles there. And one of the Civil War battles was the Monitor versus the Merrimack, or so I thought. Now, that was the first battle of ironclad ships. And it happened right off at a place called, it was in the water, but it was a place called Hampton Roads, right, off a peninsula in Virginia. Hampton Roads, the Battle of Hampton Roads, or the Battle of the Ironclads. And that battle took place on March 9th, 1862, at the very beginning of the Civil War. Don't forget, controlling the waterways was an important part of not only winning the war, but keeping trade and commerce alive. If the Union in the South was going to continue to raise money to fund their war machines, they had to sell cotton in the South, they had to sell industrial products in the North, and often you needed waterways to move those goods around, whether it was within America or the continent, or whether it was internationally to Europe and other places. But controlling the waterways was vital, and it really gave birth to what became the U.S. Navy. But the Confederates, the Merrimack, so the Monitor was the federal ship, which was the second ironclad. South, the Confederates built the first ironclad, and it was officially called the CSS, the Confederate States, not the USS, the CSS, the Confederate States. Virginia, it was called the CSS Virginia. It was originally the USS Merrimack. It was originally just a big sailboat, wooden ship, steamer kind of thing. But when the Union abandoned Norfolk Harbor, they burned the Merrimack to the waterline, and it sank. Well, the Confederates raised it. It's a big ship. It was big enough to put in the big engine, and they built, instead of rebuilding a wood decking with masts and sails and all that, they put a big engine in it, and they didn't burn the Union didn't burn the boat enough where it was unusable, the hull and everything else. And then they built the ironclad dome above the original Merrimack boat, structure, and it officially became the CSS Virginia. And the Virginia wrought havoc in some of the other ships in Hampton Roads Harbor, destroyed anything wooden that came. The guns from the wooden boats couldn't penetrate the iron, did no damage to it, of the USS Virginia, the CSS Virginia. And it basically gave the Virginia the chance to fire it well on the wooden ships and destroy them. And they did. On the first day, the Confederates scored a huge victory, destroying many Union ships. But then on March 9th, the next day, the USS Monitor, which was built from scratch, there was a bid put out for designs, and it was a guy named Erickson, if I remember, had the design that won it. And the Merrimack, excuse me. But once Merrimack, now Virginia, did battle with the with the Monitor, two ironclads, and they kind of fought to a draw. Nobody really did any damage. And these ships, I don't know the history of what happened with these ships throughout the rest of the war, but certainly with a longer term view, this changed naval warfare forever, and it proved that wooden boats were no match for the emerging iron and other metal technology that would come along. So anyway, there was a great museum there called the Mariners Museum and Park, right in just outside of Williamsburg, I think, in Tidewater area. I can't remember the name of the place, but just 20-minute drive from Williamsburg, and it was we got to go back. I mean, we only had 2.5 hours to spend there, and you needed 2.5 days. It was a beautiful place. So anyway, great vacation there, and then we've come to Memorial Day, and again I mentioned to this we've come, where and let me share this with you, where a sitting president of the United States seemingly does not understand what Memorial Day is all about, and might even think, if you look at that picture, she might even think that it's about her. Enjoy the long weekend. To Vice President Kamala Harris, Memorial Day is nothing but a long weekend, an undescript, generic long weekend. And it's about her, as with the picture. No picture of American flag or grave sites. To this we've come, that we have elected. I think President Biden's speech was probably okay. I didn't hear it all, but it sounded okay. But a vice president of the United States completely out of touch with what America's about, what Memorial Day is about, and has to make it about her. And this is what happens. So this we've come, where everything is upside down in the liberal never land of make believe. I gotta say, listen, there's a reason Harris withdrew before the first vote in the Democrat primary. This is the most out of touch, self-centered, doesn't get it politician I've ever seen, and yet she is vice president of the United States. This is what Memorial Day in America is about. Those who gave their lives in defense of freedom, whether it was in this country or overseas. Always watch my war memorial movies on Veterans Day. For the 80th time, I can't, watch the end of Private Ryan. And remember, it ends right here in Arlington Cemetery. Brought a tear to my eye again, like it always does, as the then Private Ryan remembered. I can't think of the guy's name in the show, but the great part played by Tom Hanks. Memorial Day is a lot more than just a long weekend. Without those brave Americans, men and women, gave their lives over the years, without Memorial Day, we would not have any other holidays in this country. We wouldn't even be celebrating Christmas and Easter and Hanukkah and Rosh Hashanah or whatever else, Ramadan, because the fascists and the communists who sought to rule our country don't believe in God even. They believe that we should worship them, government, the dictator, the fascists. To this we've come. And that particular line, that we should worship men and their institutions instead of God. I'm paraphrasing, but it's one of the lines in the aria we're going to play for you tomorrow. So don't forget to tune in tomorrow. It's going to be, I mean, this aria really hits me, and I hope it has the same effect on you. Now, there's another reason why my trip to Virginia, to Williamsburg last week, ties into all this. Now, take a look at this article, and then I'll explain it to you. But this is a headline in the news, Drudge Report. Democrats in Virginia want to rewrite the motto on this Memorial Day to remove language from Lincoln's second inaugural. Now, here's the motto right here. You can see it. And the motto, as it says here, is based on a specific quote from Lincoln's second inaugural. And this has to do with Memorial Day because of the way that Lincoln said we must pay homage and take care of those families who lost loved ones in defense of freedom. That speech over time led to the formation of the Veterans Association in this country and to what was originally called Decoration Day, which was the predecessor of Memorial Day. But the make-believe, anti-American, Marxist left wants to change that motto or eliminate it because they don't think it's inclusive enough of women in the LGBTQ, A, B, C, D, F, G, H community. On Memorial Day, a lot of people believe that Lincoln's second inaugural address were the greatest words ever written. I think the Gettysburg Address was by Lincoln. But anyway, on Memorial Day, they want to alter and they want to politicize the speech that led to Memorial Day and the Veterans Association, which does such a great job honoring our fallen heroes. To this we've come. I mean, to this we've come theme, we're gonna keep with it. Because when I say it, it's referring not just to the words in this song, but it's a perfect substitute for the land of Never Never Land, make believe that we've talked so much about. To this we've come. I mean, if you're like me, you are astounded, alarmingly marveling that we've come to this point. But all hope is not lost, folks. All hope is not lost. So let me just shift gears just a little bit. So I saw this, from the Telegraph in London. Now, there was a lot of talk there about COVID passports, COVID passes, whatever you want to call them. In Britain, massive demonstration recently, massive demonstration by the people saying no. And it worked. Their voices were heard. It's now widely expected, and I don't know if it's officially been announced yet, but as of this morning, everyone was saying that Britain was scrapping its plan. Based on that public outcry, Britain was scrapping its plans to implement COVID passports. Now, I don't think this government, state or federal or local. No, I don't know about local. There's some pretty crazy local governments out there. I don't know if they have the authority, but anyway, state or federal, whatever, implement passports. Well, we know a lot of private industries are trying to do it. Cruise lines. We know other countries are doing it. The Netherlands. As I'll show you in a minute. So Florida is trying to ban private companies from doing these. He's going to run into a legal battle with the cruise lines who are demanding COVID passports for its passengers. And passports are just one more form of government tyranny, again, which is just politics against the will of the people without the consent of the will of the people. But passports are just one more form of government regulation or tyranny. So take a look at this. Rhode Island, the headline was Rhode Island, two governors, the Rhode Island's executive branch, because we've had two governors, right? Raimondo and now McKee. In New England have issued more executive orders since the start of the pandemic than anyone else. Here it is, Rhode Island number one. And that has resulted in what we told you it was going to result in: economic devastation. And here we are. We rank 50th in the country in job recovery from the pandemic. Why? Because we've overregulated. The government has tried to manage our lives. And you've seen the numbers. We have among the highest infection rates. We had among the highest death rates. Certainly amongst, and we are in the bottom five. When it comes to economic recovery, we lost on both fronts. We lost economically and we lost medically. And we were supposed to have the medical restrictions and lockdowns and mass, and so in order to, right, so that we could recover economically quicker. We failed on both counts. This is what big government does. It will, it's a failure. That's Reagan said. The worst words ever. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. We're no longer in a state of emergency. We shouldn't have been for many months. Why have we not ended this state of emergency in Rhode Island? You saw the number one ranking in New England, 170 executive orders in Rhode Island during the pandemic. 170. That's 170 acts of tyranny. None of which you, me, or the majority of Rhode Islanders would have approved of. Maybe the first 10. Maybe in the first 2-week pause. Here's another one. Rhode Island, one of only, I don't know how many states to still have child student mask mandates in school. All those dark blue states there, not blue because of their politics, just blue because they require masks. I was talking to a teacher when I was at my party over the weekend. She said, son, on warm days, most schools don't have air conditioning. On warm days, wearing those masks is absolutely unbearable. And it's unhealthy, probably. So you can just tell you just don't feel right. Yeah, because the teachers union, who we must pay homage to, demands it, our state demands it. So we talked about, so the lesson here, again, keep this lesson in mind. I'm going to say it now. I'm going to repeat it after this next little piece I'll show you. It's in the name of our center, freedom and prosperity. And it proves true all the time, and it's going to prove true again in what I'm going to show you. But with the more freedoms we have, the more prosperous we will be. The people, you and me, and we, when left to our own devices, will be far more innovative, creative, and productive than anything mandated or designed by government. In almost every case. In almost every case. The more freedom we have, the more prosperous we'll be. Here's another example. So, the census numbers came out, a few weeks ago. Rhode Island barely survived losing a seat. But they looked at the top 50 metropolitan areas. Providence wasn't in. I haven't been able to find the Providence numbers once you get past the top 50 metropolitan areas. But again, the cities that lost the most population were those cities with the highest taxes and presumably, highest regulations. Detroit, Baltimore, Long Beach, Milwaukee, Chicago. New York, I remember, was in the top 10. All cities with extraordinarily high city and state county tax rates. And failed schools. That's why people leave. If it's bad for you economically, they can't educate the kids, they're going to leave if they have the means to. Conversely, the states with population gains of 20% or more, with the exception of Denver, as it says here, all are relatively low tax states. But yet the left, especially in this state, doesn't understand that. They act in their land of make-believe. They actually believe that they can impose more taxes, whether it be on the wealthy, or whether it be on, on energy, like they're doing, that it's going to have no consequence on families, that we can just do these things in Never Land, and everything's going to be fine. Now, here's the fifth. Let's see, 1, 2, 6th. This is the 6th flyer I've gotten from the unions who have joined with the progressive left to promote higher taxes in Rhode Island. They're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to convince Americans, try to build some support, that higher taxes won't have any negative consequence. We'll be just fine. It is thinking like that. Well, let me preface that. To this we've come. To this we've come. That you can think that you can tax people more on their energy, on their income taxes, their capital gains, whatever it is, and it's going to have no negative consequence on the economy or on the budgets of families. To this we've come. It's stunning. It's stunning that we talk about something. Again, freedom equals prosperity. More freedom, more prosperity. More government, which means less freedom, less innovation, less productivity, less prosperity. All right. Interesting. Just quick review around the states before we get to our guest. In Texas, now if you saw that, they've got an election integrity bill. Let's see, the left has made this the narrative now. It doesn't matter what the facts is, just like we saw in Georgia and why we boycotted baseball, Major League Baseball for most of April, for all of April, half of May. That election integrity equals voter suppression. That's false. That's a false narrative. You can make it easy to vote, but hard to cheat. You can do that. And many states are trying to make it harder to cheat without making it harder to vote. It is not a right to vote by mail without providing ID. That is not a right. So Texas has this bill to help make it harder to cheat, to ensure election integrity. Democrats literally walked out of the chamber. Literally walked out, so they couldn't have to have a quorum, which means you have to have, well, you need a certain threshold pass a bill, you need a higher threshold in order to hold a vote, even hold a vote in the first place. So Democrats in the Texas legislature walked out so there wouldn't be enough of a quorum. Now, you might remember they tried to do that in Wisconsin in, I don't know, 2012 or so, when Governor Walker was trying to pass those major labor reforms up there. They walked out. Eventually, they came back. But Governor Abbott isn't having any of that. Here's his tweet. We haven't seen exactly what he does yet, he's going to do yet, but here's what he's threatening. He's threatening, first of all, if you walk out and don't fulfill your responsibilities as an employee of the state, we're not going to pay you for that time. So we'll see how that goes. The second thing, so he's talking about vetoing an article in the proposed budget that would do that. And he's also talking about calling a special session. The governors can call special sessions, which might be, I don't know when it would be, wouldn't be right away. And it would require lawmakers to come back and vote on whatever the special circumstance was. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, and now, as you know, in Congress, the Republicans are threatening to do the same thing in the Senate. Maybe. They're talking, the HR 1 and the Senate version of that in the US Congress would make it easier to vote and easier to cheat. That's not the goal. That shouldn't be the goal, but that's what that bill would do. And Republicans, if they think there might be enough Democrat votes, are talking about walking out so there can't be a quorum. I don't know if President Biden can call a special session and force that to happen. But anyway, this is, legislation is supposed to have some, ideally, it's not supposed to, ideally should have some bipartisan component to it. That's why things are set up the way they're set up in our Congress. Listen, if one group gets in power and wants to push an extreme agenda, the other side vehemently doesn't believe him, then it shouldn't pass. But if you can get something that both sides can sort of agree to, then that's how the sausage is made or should be made. But Democrats don't see it that way. Maybe even the Republicans in Texas don't see it that way. Again, I'm not picking sides here, I'm just giving you the news. Also in state news, Florida, Governor DeSantis making news again. Now you can see here now, he signed a bill to ban transgender females from female sports. We've had Dr. Michelle Cretella on here and bill sponsor Senator Elaine Morgan talking about why it's totally unfair. You have these biological males who identify as females competing in girls' sports. It's not only unfair, it's potentially dangerous when there's wrestling and other physical activity like that involved. Just like we said, and there's no science in the world that says that any surgery, any dose of hormones, or any combination of such, along with any wishful thinking of your by clicking your shoes together, can turn an XY male into an XX female. Can't happen. People can identify what they want, but don't ask for special rights. Now, I also brought up this particular article because Legal Interaction, I just learned today about them. Apparently, this is a group that has a founder and president apparently is a Rhode Island native. So we're going to try to reach out to that person and get that person on our show soon. In just a minute or so, we're going to bring on Travis Rowley. And the question really to keep in mind as we go through our interview with Travis, and we'll explain to you what his article today or his blog was today. Do we want critical race theory, which is which is a way to talk about the woke agenda? Critical race theory or critical thinking? To me, what you're seeing here on your screen is critical race theory, is the woke thinking. I only see what my woke masters tell me to see. I see nothing else, and what I see, I will automatically believe. That's not critical thinking. We don't have much critical thinking in universities anymore. We have blinders on, follow the leader. obeisance, whatever you say. Wokeness is not critical thinking. Critical thinking is good. Critical race theory is bad. And racism has gotten to the point where the left has become obsessed with it and use it as an excuse for the failures of left-wing policies, left-wing education, and even many left-wing or minority groups. Race has become the crutch upon which they claim, they keep themselves up by denying the reality of what is the real problem with certain policies or within certain communities. Joining us now is Travis Rowley. Travis has been on our show before. He's the, I guess you could say, the founder of Good Men, which is a an audio and text blog series that he runs. Travis long been part of the freedom movement, not only in Rhode Island, but regionally and nationally. Travis, welcome back in the dugout.
Good to be in the digital dugout, Mike. I like it.
Digital dugout. Yeah, gotta love that. Now I see you're playing the game. That's great. What cap do you have on for us today?
I no one's ever given me a Sox hat, but I have this is Deep Eddy vodka. I don't get paid to wear it, but it's a great summer drink. This, if you see me drinking this is water.
Okay, right? That's not the vodka. Okay.
It's not the vodka.
Yeah, mine too. That's just water right there. All right, so you put out, apparently you woke up this morning, read an article, and just had to put out some commentary. The title of your piece today was, under the Good Men brand, was "The Damaging Racism of the Race Obsessed," and you were referring to Providence school system administrators. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, one particular administrator wrote in the Boston Globe. His name's Matt Buchanan, and not that it matters to you, people like you and me, but I guess he's probably a person of color, black or brown, and he's very upset in the context of the state takeover of the Providence school system that the people replacing teachers and administrators aren't, in his words, brown or black enough. And, and I've been obsessed lately with the race-obsessed leftists, the Democrats. Everything is about race. It's racist. And they're battling racism with their own anti-white racism. And it's getting infuriating and just weird. And I just thought that the Providence, with what's going on with the Providence school system, if there was ever a time to just shut up.
And the nonsense, right?
But the liberals, these progressives, are never ashamed. They're never embarrassed. The Providence school system is abysmal. It's right down there with like Baltimore and Detroit. And
the horror show.
I started out with, with some hyperbole, like there isn't a kid in the school system who can read. And obviously that's not true, but it's almost that bad. If there was ever a time to just put your stupid race obsession to the side, it's now. I mean, a lot of changes when you have kids. And I got these 3 little boys now that are running around between 5 and 1. And you really think about their education a lot. And you only have a very short amount of time to educate them. It really is that serious. And when you start looking at what happens if you just blow through your school years without learning anything, everything gets bad. The higher percentage go to prison, higher percentage are in poverty. You ruin people's lives. And these Democrats and the Union Democrat school system in Providence ruins people's lives.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing how allegiance is to a teachers union, who in turn has allegiance to the Democrat Party, which in turn now has allegiance to the progressive Marxist left, how all those allegiances, those political allegiances, are more important than the education of our children. And in this case, the one thing that can raise a whole race of Americans, or many of them, potentially and likely out of poverty. It's amazing that political allegiances are stronger than the relief of poverty.
Yeah, the political alliances and the allegiance to an ideology, a far left ideology that you don't suspect an average everyday teacher would be so obsessed with, getting the critical race theory into their students and making them good little citizens before they can read or do basic math. That really is, the more you dig, the more upsetting it gets, that because lives are being ruined. And then you think about the attacks on people like you and me who don't care about people. You're selfish, rich Republicans only for the business class, while these liberals get away with literally ruining people's lives.
Yep.
These kids have a few years to get it right, to mold them correctly. And they are just, I just thought if there's ever a time to just put the race thing aside, if the kid is learning, who cares if the teacher is white? And because I think there's even a point to be made. I think there's even a point to be made that maybe black kids in the Providence school system need to see black leaders.
But Travis, come on, you're not black, so how can you speak about this? You don't have any right to speak about this. This is the point of what this one educator, this Matthew Buchanan, was saying, that there's not enough administrators and teachers in the school system who look like most of the students in the school system. So come on, you don't have any credibility on this, Travis.
Yeah, and I'm reading it and I'm just getting fed up because in the context of the total failure of the school system, people of that mindset, that race obsessed, diversity is everything mindset, have had their day. They had their chance. They had many chances, decades long. And everyone knows the secret about the Providence school system now. The kids aren't learning. It's affecting them for the rest of their life. They're in poverty. They're going to prison and welfare for the rest of their life, generational. And yeah, I mean, obviously they want to discredit white people and conservatives by saying, listen, you're black, you don't understand. If there's ever a time where you just need to shut up, it's now.
But as you pointed out in your piece today, they don't seem to object too much to having white people and people who don't look like them pay taxes to supposedly support their schools, right? I mean, we don't want your comments, but we want your tax dollars, right?
So obviously that was a little jab, and you guys have. I actually wanted to ask you that question. Is I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that the concept basically is that they destroy these cities. People move to the suburbs to get away from Democrat-run cities. But the blue state Democrats take that money from the burbs, bring it to the state house, and refunnel it back into Providence anyway. Right. I just don't know how extreme that is. I was actually wondering if you could pull any numbers, but that's basically what happens. Is that I'm so sick of taking Narragansett or Coventry tax dollars back to the state house so they can support their socialist system in Providence and Pawtucket and Central Falls. Central Falls has been run by the state for 30 years, right? I mean, people don't realize that Central Falls doesn't pay for its own school system like every other city and town.
Right.
And I mean, these failed socialist experiments inside these deep blue inner cities need to be called out. I mean, I'd love to defund them, and while we can't defund them, we've got to call them out. And this guy, I just think, going back to not having any shame, it's just like, they can't even take a breath.
But it seems to me also, this goes back, I mean, for how many decades now, Travis, have we been hearing about how SAT scores were racist because, I don't know, I'll use the word disadvantaged children couldn't understand the premise of the question. Isn't all this just an excuse for the failure of these inner city progressive left school districts? Isn't this all just an excuse? First it was the SAT test didn't reflect the color of the students taking the test, and now it's the administrators and teachers aren't of the same color of the students in the classroom. I mean,
yeah, just
nothing more than an excuse, right?
Just a couple things is that some quick responses to that. That of course there's no excuse to that when it comes to the math portion of the SAT, and the results were always the same.
Math is racist, I heard.
Yeah, but now math is racist. I never thought
requiring a specific correct answer is somehow racist.
I never thought it would get this absurd on the left, and that's why I've argued before that people don't even know what conservatism is, because conservatism has been relegated to just common sense conservatism. Things that Democrats, like just think about, socialism. Like socialism is a mainstream idea on the left. Low taxes. Like, people have no idea how conservative it can get. I mean, like abolishing the IRS. What about national borders? You know, and what about the gender bending theory inside the Democratic Party now? 9-month abortions. You go back to the Clinton Democratic Party of the 90s, and this is all area where both parties would agree. But now this Democratic Party is so taken over by that far left universe that you
Yeah.
that
So
you used to only see in the universities.
we introduced a new concept on the show today, and we're going to explain it more in tomorrow's show via an aria. But what you're saying is the theme I talked about earlier in my opening comments. To this we've come. I mean, it's just amazing that we're at this place where, like you said, common sense is thrown away. They accuse us, science is ignored, and the narrative of the identity politics narrative trumps, no pun intended, yes, pun intended, trumps, that the narrative trumps reality.
Yeah, and I think you have that in this case too. I think it's another example. Like, the state takeover of the Providence school system isn't something that I'm for, but it brings me back to the reforms that they were trying to do within the entire education system of Rhode Island, and she left because the unions gave her such hell, and I can't think of her name right now. Not Gallo, but this is state education. They're trying to make reforms inside government education,
Yep. And let's remember, this is government-run education. Let's keep that in mind, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about government-run education. We shouldn't even call it public schools anymore. Government education, right?
Yeah, it's government-run, far left government-run education, which I'm not even in favor of. But if that's the way it's going to be for now, we at least need adults running that system. And when I can't remember her name, and I'm really sorry, 5-10 years ago, and she's gone now to like Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, the former commissioner. Yeah.
The unions wouldn't give her an inch. She just wanted higher standards for the schools. As long as there's going to be this system that we're living under, there should be an adult in the room running it. So it's the same thing with Principal Buchanan of Hope High School, who all of a sudden these kids can't read, but he's upset with the color of the skin of the new administrators. And it's just listen, common sense tells you that you need to deprioritize race for a second. These kids are in big trouble. And this isn't a conservative saying it. This is just an adult in the room saying, shut your mouth about race for one second.
And you and I both, you're a Brown University grad. I wear my Harvard hat often on this show. And we know that education is not racist. We know the reality of the situation, and we know the false narratives they create. All right, we're talking with Travis Rowley. The Damaging Racism of the Race Obsessed was the title of his blog this morning. Let's raise this up a little, Travis. You and I were talking off air, and I'd like you to explain what you meant by this. I asked you about, critical race theory is an adaptation of this critical theory. Critical theory being the Marxist narrative, if you would, that pitted the oppressed, right, the common man, who everybody was oppressed, against the ruling class, where everybody in the ruling class was an oppressor. And in critical race theory, that was all based on wealth. Those who had wealth oppressed those without wealth. Well, critical race theory just substitutes race instead of wealth. And I said, and you said, no, you're a little younger than me, obviously, you can tell from looking at it, but you said this has pretty much been what's been in your education with kids your age and younger, and maybe even a little older, have learned throughout their whole lives. Explain that.
Yeah, I think critical race theory, people are starting to understand the definition of it, but it's what we've all been living through for maybe longer than 30 years, maybe 30 to 40 years. It's been in the university since the 70s, I know that. This new theory, it's neo-Marxism. They substituted the rich against the poor, and that those group identities, and the Soviet Union collapses. What are you going to do now? Well, it's men versus women. It's always the oppressor versus the oppressed. It's white versus black. It's where.
Well, and the reason the Soviet Union collapsed, and the reason that didn't sell, is because people weren't buying it so much, and especially in America, people aren't going to buy it that wealth is bad, right? We're raised in a capitalist society. least some of us were, but we don't have, as a people generally, other than these obsessed few, have a problem with wealth. So pitting wealth, this wealth warfare wasn't going to work in America, and that's one of the reasons they went over to race warfare.
Yeah, it comes down to, you know, the deadly sin of envy. That's where the left feeds off
Yeah.
of. But we have too many individualists in America. It's shrinking, but it's getting worse by the day. But we're individualists, and a lot of us conservatives, particularly, look at a rich guy and we aspire to be him. We don't have envy for what he has. We think, how did he do that? How can I get there? How can I strive for that? The left is driven by envy. Socialists are driven by envy. They see inequality and they cannot rationalize it in their head. They just think that it's an evil that someone has $1 million and someone lives on the street, and that's where
They
they
must
try
have
to,
gotten that by oppressing somebody, right?
exactly.
Right.
It's oppressor. So they've just done a bait and switch, and they've slipped race, gender, gay versus straight in there
Yep.
for rich and poor, and that's
Identity politics. Yeah, all the
Yeah,
identity isms.
that's
Yep.
critical race theory. And that's why it doesn't critical race theory and the group identity and the group politics, identity politics, doesn't jive with so many, like, you know, blue-blooded Americans who are just individualists at heart, and they don't like hearing what is obvious anti-white racism, because it's like, it's not all white people, it's not all black people, but the left is saying, no, it is. You're white and you don't know it, but you have white privilege, and it's not jiving with people that are of our mindset. And a lot of
All right, so I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but let me tell me if this. Let me take about a minute here, but tell me if this might be another way to think about what you wrote today. So as we've discussed, critical race theory is part of the Marxist con, right? Where you spread the big lie, you spread the narrative. No, in particular, just the critical race theory has a number of big lies to them. You know, one is that policing in the U.S. is systematically racist. That that election integrity equals voter suppression, and that equity, like you were saying earlier, somehow equity becomes the necessary outcome, not freedom and not opportunity. But yet these lies grow stronger and they propagate. And then along with the media, the compliant media, the co-conspirators in the media, they spreading this message that everything is racist. And now I'm coming back to your article, and I would call this all government-sponsored racism, right? What this is really government in our schools. This is government-sponsored racism. We're seeing it happen even outside of the schools, and that only by more government reverse racism can we solve the original racism they claim exists. Isn't that the great irony here?
Yeah, that's them claiming to be chasing equity, and it will never end, and it's causing so much division in this country. I mean a lot of hatred. I mean, that cold civil war that we're going through right now is entirely the left's fault. I hear people that are kind of in the middle on politics think that both sides are, but the people who are punching first and trying to and using overt anti-white racism to battle their historical group injustices as they perceive it are starting fights every day, and it's causing a lot of, let's say, white resentment, because white people cannot take it for that long. They cannot be told to shut up. You can't have an opinion because you're white. They can't have to tolerate overt anti-white racism in their face. They can't be forced to pay for programs that they don't want to support and told to shut their mouth. That is building up so much racial resentment inside, I'd say, white America, that it's not like that. They want to say, oh, racism still exists. It's like it's not like white supremacy of the Deep South in the 1800s still exists. There's so much racial resentment building up because the left is on the offensive with a lot of their own.
The media's propagating it all. Yeah, without any questioning. Now, the big flaw in all this, and you mentioned it earlier when you brought up identity politics. Identity politics, we should put another word in there, identity group politics, right? And they believe that certain groups, special groups, should have special rights. But the flaw with that is, in America, groups don't have rights. Individuals As God created human beings, individuals have rights, rights that don't infringe on anyone others and rights that don't supersede anyone else's rights. So this is where the whole thing goes wrong, because as soon as you favor one group and give special privileges to one group, it has to come at the expense of some other group. And by definition, that is divisive. When everybody has the same rights on an individual one-by-one basis, it doesn't infringe on anyone else. Isn't that where this whole thing goes off the rails?
That's where the left is ripping, sponsored right inside the Democratic Party, right through it, is ripping this country apart. And people need to wise up to it. Stop fighting amongst yourselves and realize who is putting these ideas out there and starting these little scrabbles we see all the time. The Chicago mayor last week said that she won't offer interviews to white reporters, only black and brown reporters. This thing runs through the Democratic Party. It is every day you wake up to another unashamed anti-white racism that you have to just shut your mouth and take. And it goes back to, it's another example, Mike, of conservatives being forced to carry the mantle of common sense. Everyone loves MLK. Martin Luther King got it right.
Common sense.
Not the color stuff. I don't know what to say, but maybe he's rolling in his grave if you could see these Democrats, what they're doing, these black Democrats, what they're doing these days with group identity politics. I mean, by his own words, the things that we all love to learn about MLK, now conservative Republicans are the ones carrying his message, at least that message that everyone celebrated for the past 50 years. Yep. We're the ones carrying that. And that was a common sense American thing for the past half century.
Yeah, but it's all gone. It's all gone into the liberal never land and make believe. All right, his name is Travis Rowley. His piece is The Damaging Racism of the Race Obsessed. His blog series, Good Men, will be started to be featured regularly on our blog site, oceanstatecurrent.com, and we invite you to go visit that. We're going to be posting his commentary from today and future commentaries from Travis Rowley, and he will be a regular contributor to the show. Travis, thanks for joining us today on In the Dugout.
Love to be in the dugout.
Great discussion there with Travis Rowley. I know I spoke long earlier, but it's just so alarming that to this we've come, that we're at this point in our society where never land pretend trumps reality. Tomorrow, please tune in. Our special guest, Claire, I'll give you that hint. The world premiere performance of an aria written in the 1940s about the evils of communism. And guess what, folks? We're doing it all over again. And this aria will expose that. It's a brilliant piece. It's a brilliant performance. And we're going to talk to the woman, a Rhode Island native, who performed that on tomorrow's show. Thursday, South Kingston suing a parent for asking too many questions, and Dr. Boston. From the Dugout, Mike Stenhouse. See you next game.